And welcome back to AR's Tales, aka the ART podcast. I am AR Bala, and today I am joined by a rare beast on this podcast, a graphic artist, Mike Alger, Dork Art Comics. He has a lot to talk to us about today. Mike, how are you?
Graphic artist, that is not something I'm used to being introduced as. So I just gotta have you follow me around and just introduce me to people. I'm gonna, you up for that?
Oh yeah, I mean, you are the artist behind a graphic novel. I mean, what else? What else, right? Graphic artist, right?
It's not a graphic novel. I'm doing a series of. I mean, eventually it will be collected and stuff, but I'm doing a series of first issues with some characters that I've come up with. They all exist in the same world, and gradually working up towards what I like to refer to as kind of like a dysfunctional Fantastic Four. I'm going to collect them. But yeah, I tend to just graphic artist. I appreciate it. I like it. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's a new one for me. I tend to use the term cartoonist, or, I'm just a guy drawing funny pictures.
Man, it's funny, the way that terms kind of go. I mean, the first time that I got on a recording and called myself an author, it was like, oh, huh. I mean, I guess I am. I mean, that's what I've done, but it's just weird to kind of give yourself that title, right?
Yeah, it took me a long time to get comfortable calling myself an artist. Because other people would see my stuff and they would say oh, you're an artist, and I'm like, and I just had never felt. It took a while to get comfortable with that label, and because I think, and I don't know if it was similar for you in terms of the author side of things, but feeling comfortable with your work and okay, I kind of know what I'm doing now, and I kind of feel like I understand what I'm trying to do with this, and a style, and just getting comfortable with your own work before you can accept that label or not.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy how that type of work goes. Now, without kind of teasing any more about it, can you tell us a little bit about Dork Art Comics? What are the issues they're working on? What are the characters? What is the IP?
Dork Art Comics is the name that I gave my line of comics. I can do more than just tease. I mean, I can show you.
Please do.
I'm doing a series. I have four main characters that I write and draw, and again, Dork Arts is just the name that, because I needed a name for, you got to name it, right? And I was listening to, of all things, a Chris Hardwick stand-up routine, and he had talked about yes, I am a practitioner of the Dork Arts, and it clicked. I'm like, oh yes, that's what it is, and that's the name I've been using since I plugged into Instagram. The comics I'm doing right now, this first one is my first guy here. I named him Burn Unit, spelled Bern, because his real name is Bernard. That one, that was the first one I did back in 2016, and I love it. It's my first one. It's tough for me to look at, though, just in terms of what I've learned in terms of drawing, inking, coloring, actually constructing a comic, and it's tough for me to look at, and I have to suppress the urge to go back and redo it all.
Yeah.
And then the second one I have is this is my Monster Hunter girl. If you're into the badass female lead types, this is Sydney James. And she goes, I gave her the name of Benetrix, which is, I looked at it, it's Romanian for huntress, or hunter. Because the background that I gave her was, she's of Romanian descent, and I'm sure there's something about vampires and monsters and stuff, in there. And so she was the second comic I did shortly after Bernie. And then this one is one that I did last year, about a year and a half ago, I think. This is a fun little 7-page one that I did of a character called Cannoli Girl, which was of all the comics that I've done, aside from the one that I'm currently working on, was probably the most fun that I've had doing a comic. And Cannoli Girl was born out of an embarrassing story that a family friend told about herself. And we were at a Christmas party a couple years ago, and I was talking with her now husband, and me and some other guys were talking, and he had mentioned, like, somebody had cannolis on the table, and he was like, "Oh, don't let her see those, like, because she's all about them." And then she looked over and was like, "You're not telling them about Cannoli Girl, are you?" And I'm like, "Nope, but you are now." And she tells us this story about how she just, after work when she was younger, she would always stop at this place and get one. And she couldn't. She called one day to get one, and they were sold out. And they kept referring to her as Cannoli Girl. And she's just telling the story, and I'm like, I have to do something with this. And the character of Cannoli Girl and the real person, like, picture a young kindergarten teacher. Okay, picture the nicest person you can ever imagine. Do not alter that image. And that's Cannoli Girl. She has no powers, no super abilities. She just has this comedically large cannoli and just an unwavering sense to just do the right thing and be a good person. And that's her.
Man, that is really interesting. So she didn't fall into a vat of radioactive cannoli cream?
Not radioactive, but she did. She does run a bakery, and she did, fall into a vat of cannoli cream. And then upon coming up for air, her life's purpose was revealed to her. And it was just a fun way for me to put in all those, like, just those silly comic tropes that we've all grown up and read, and just, that we all kind of laugh at, but are like, they're tropes for a reason. And it was just a way for me to do that in this, fun little comic. And she exists in the world with all the other ones. And I'm currently working on, I just finished page 28 last night. I have 2 more pages to finish, like, between this week and next week, of my next character, Adrian Hodges. And he's like he's your John Constantine, if he wasn't such an asshole. He's the wizard, he's the sorcerer, and doing that comic, it's allowed me to kind of just blow open the world that I'm trying to build, and put all those those mystical, magical elements into a character, and further the world that I'm building.
Man, I love that. The Cannoli Girl IP, an idea, reminds me of Max Fury. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It was it was when Kickstarter first started, and it was like people were actually, like, really, really, like about it, and just, like, funding, like, random things. There were these people that got a movie funded, and it was a little 30-minute feature film, and actually got picked up on Netflix. I believe it's now on Netflix original. You can watch it right now if you have.
All right.
And within 30 minutes, they fight a time-traveling Hitler. There are animatronic Nazis. They meet Thor, the god of thunder. They meet Athena. I mean, everything you can imagine. There's 80s synth music playing throughout the entire thing. There's karate sequences. The movie has everything you can imagine, and it's one of those things that as you're watching it, you're just like, but it's kind of what you said, is that, like, even though it seems like ridiculous, they're hitting every note of what you've seen before. Like, they literally made an homage to action movies as a general. Yep. The same way that you seem to have made an homage to comics, even though, like, the idea of Cannoli Girl might seem so random.
Yeah, and I now that you've explained it, I know exactly which one you're talking about, and it's one of those ones, like, I've wanted to watch it, but just, like, you never really end up getting around to it. But you look at it and you watch the trailer, you're like, this is everything you would want it to be.
Everything.
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 And like, fighting a Tyrannosaurus Rex, you're like, yes, of course he would do.
Exactly. Yes, yes. I honestly, I was scared for a second because like there's a couple movies like that are ridiculous, like Iron Sky, which is the whole idea of like if like Nazi didn't lose and just like went to the dark side of the moon after World War II. Ridiculous things like that, which is, by the way, Iron Sky, another great one. But it's not the same testament that Max Fury is, because Max Fury is half hour, and I'm telling you, it's like they squeezed everything of action movies of the time frame. They put it in one thing. It's like the Jimmy Neutron episode where he decides to make the candy that has every flavor, sour, chocolate, everything. That's what that movie is.
And I feel like the reason like why like Iron Sky may not have worked is like trying to do those things. And I mean, I've never seen Iron Sky. Like it's been a long time. I feel like, but like I feel like Iron Sky tried to be serious about it, whereas like
they weren't.
I mean,
I've seen it, but like no. But continue on with the point.
I like Max Fury was not trying to take itself seriously.
Hacker dude. Homie puts on the glove and it's like a computer. I mean, that movie's amazing.
But yeah, like it's a way to just kind of put those tropes in there and just have fun with it, and not that I take any of it really seriously. Like I do try to put some serious elements into the books, but like also not take it seriously, and because like it's comics, it's supposed to be fun, and maybe you get something out of it, maybe you don't. Like I know what I'm trying to do with it, whether that, gets picked up by a reader, or if anybody else recognizes what I'm trying to do, great. But, this is something that I'm really just doing for myself. Like I'm not trying to be I'm not trying to do comics full time. It really is just like a passion and something that was born out of a time in my life that just as I did it more, grew into something very fulfilling for me, so, I'm making it up a page at a time, man.
My God, there are literally an endless amount of things that I can talk about from like this point. I mean, there's so many questions that I have. Just you've shown 4 comics done, right? It immediately makes me think, especially that what you said about the creation of your first one and looking back to it. So even though I feel like a lot of people can kind of like, I have been slacking as far as like my duties go as like an authorship, just because I've been, trying to spin the plates on everything else. I haven't been like, like hustling down to like the thing. But even then, when I pick up my book, I still have that feeling of like, damn, because I still do write. So even just with the writing that I'm doing now for my second book, the thing, my chapter 3 of my second book that I'm currently writing, I look at my older book and I'm like, man, why couldn't I think of this, a couple months ago? Or just like even the way that I write, or like the way that certain things, or just even how I took to certain critiques that I learned from the first book. I'm looking back on it now, just like, damn. And thinking the same thing of like, man, I should redo, before I even go to book 2, I should go ahead and just redo book 1 and just keep on going the cycle of redoing book 1 until the point that I have, and then keep moving forward.
Just be the George Lucas of like, your series, like just constantly going back and like retweaking and, adding little things, and, eventually, the world takes shape.
Oh, the conversations I would have with my editor are things that I'm sure to this day she still just wakes up in the middle of the night of like in cold sweats about. Oh, thank God. Now the project's over. Because like I would just add, like there was a thing about acronym, just like time frame, like the same way that we use BC and AD and everything. I wanted to have that time frame within my book, and I'm telling you, stuck on what time frame to use. I was like, oh, should I use 3 letters? Should I use 2? And like, just like going so much into my head about it. And I remember I would bring this to my editor about it every single week, and it would be a different change. I'll be the guy. So this time we're gonna make it P period C period. That's how we're gonna do it. Week after that, it's like, all right, we don't need the periods because people understand acronyms, so we can just put PC. The week after that, yeah, you know what? We're actually gonna do A, B, E, and we're gonna bring back the periods. day after that, we're going to take away the periods. I mean, acronyms are acronyms, right? If it's a capital letters and people, what I'm saying? And NASA doesn't need to have a period after each. And I would just keep to in my head because that's just like how you do when you begin, like when you feel like you're making something, when you're making something of your own. So the question that I take to yours, because it's something that I've asked multiple times, is, since I haven't been there yet, it's something that I think about a lot. Where when you made your first project, you've made your second, you've made your third. Which one do you think was the most difficult? I've been hearing more and more that for whatever reason, a second project is hard because the first time is your first time. It's like having sex. I mean, like, you're not going to get on yourself for like messing up. I mean, it's your first time. What you want. Second time, you're a little bit more on it though, because you know now. You know a little bit more, so you just feel a little bit more of those nerves and like a little bit more of like almost like almost like a fear of like that imposter syndrome. And then by the third one, that's gone because now you had 2 books under your belt. Now you get or 2 works under your belt. Now you're kind of like, you can go with it. So, do you feel that?
Yeah, like, and like hearing you ask that and hearing you explain it, like, yeah, like, like the first one that I did, with Bernie was just like, okay, like, can I just get it done? Like, I had these ideas, I had this, I was trying to reach out to people and see if I could, get some help with it because where my abilities were at the time, and nobody, nibbles and flakes and stuff like that. And eventually I just, took the Frank Miller approach and was like, screw it, I'm just going to do it all myself. And it was like, can I just get one done? Like, can I take it from page 1 to like get a physical copy in my hand? And it was like, that was the goal with the first one. The second one, yeah, you're right. Like, I think the second one, I felt a little bit more like pressure, because it was like, okay, like, I understand this a little bit better now. I understand, I have a better idea of what I'm doing. And like, can I make it better than the first one? Can I draw better? Can I incorporate different perspectives? Can I, what have I learned about the coloring process? Like, can I make it better so it looks like, I'm actually progressing? And I mean, a lot of that pressure, we put it on ourselves, I think, but, there is that, like, like, okay, I did it, now can I do it better? Yeah, like, I think looking at the ones that I've done so far, yeah, the second one, I felt, more of that. Yeah.
Man, it's intense how that type of like stuff goes. But getting over that hump, and now that you're over that hump, how do you feel about the prospective future? You have this idea that I'm really a huge fan of, and that like all these things are almost like in order to get to to the IP that you want, right? It's all like introductional stories of expanding out the universe in order to get to this final thing of this dysfunctional Fantastic Four that you have. So how does that work? And is Cannoli Girl one of these as well, or is she just her own little thing that like a thing you want to try by itself?
I think Cannoli Girl, to answer that question first, like, I think Cannoli Girl will be kind of like a stand on her own kind of thing. Like, she's in that world, and like, maybe she comes by and says hi once in a while. Cannoli Girl is more formidable than people might give her credit for. In a way, she might be kind of like the Squirrel Girl, from Marvel. Like, like, nobody really took her seriously, but the chick took down Thanos. Like, so, don't count her out, man. But I mean, I kind of, right now, I feel like she would probably do the best, just like kind of in her own little pocket of that world, but she may come on and say, hey, here and there. The other ones, pardon my attentional abilities, but like, what was the first part of the question about getting to the point with the 4 of them that I'm trying to get to?
Prospective future. Like what is, like, you have these 4 so far. You have the one that you're currently working on now. What is the future that you have for the thing? Like, do you have it phased out like Marvel, for example? You have phase 1, phase 2, and like, the introduction to the Fantastic Four is somewhere along the timeline?
I think right now, like the projected, like the future for them looks like me. Just like I have a fourth character outside of, so I have, Barney, Sydney, my character Adrian Hodges, and I have this fourth, character that I'm going to be doing after him, doing their first their first issues, and then collecting them, doing like an 8 to 10 page story, with them together, and then I think that that's the rhythm that I want to take, is like, and then go back and do issue 2 of all of them, build up to like the team story that gets in the trade, and then go back issue 3 and kind of like repeat that process. So I guess in a way, kind of like the Marvel thing, where you have the individual movies and then you build up to the group, the Avengers movies, and then you go back and like, okay, then the individual movies again, and I mean, I really am just like, like kind of making this up, as I go along, because like this is something I've started doing, really like making concerted efforts to like further my drawing abilities, and putting comics together, and realizing that I can, since like 2014, really 2015. So this is really kind of I mean, I've always been a fan of comics. Like I'm 40. Like I grew up on a healthy diet of Marvel and DC. And I remember when Image rolled around, I was too young to kind of understand and appreciate Image for what it was, especially that second wave of like the Sam Keith guys, who's a huge influence on me. And, those like, just kind of doing whatever they wanted to do. But I was too young to kind of understand and appreciate it. But like I grew up on a very healthy diet of like Marvel and DC stuff, and just looking at it for like the cool pictures. But then as I've digested everything I possibly can about history of comics and the various artists, and techniques and styles, and how they came up with this character, and then just like the technical side of it, of like how to put a comic together and get it from paper to digital file to like getting it to a printer and getting it made and having it look the way that you want it to. I'm if I'm not doing my work, my day job, I'm digesting pretty much everything I can when it comes to various aspects of the comics world.
My God. I'm thinking too, because like, especially when you said the whole thing about like comic influences and like certain like things that like that brought you to it. Often when we talk on this podcast is around the time that I will start asking you about inspirations, and usually it's always like writing inspirations. The cool thing about graphic designing is that, the cool thing about graphic novels and comics is that it really is a medium in which not just the words are something to be highlighted on, but the images. The things that I remember the most about, graphic novels that I remember, for example, Neil Gaiman's The Sandman.
Yep.
I've read through. Now I'll be fair. I never got them myself. It was something that a friend of mine had, and he kept on getting every issue when they came out, and I would just borrow it, kind of like in backwards order. So I feel like I've read like a lot of them, but the thing that always kept me about those type of comics, right, is that the way that they would be able to convey a certain scene in a way that literally cannot be done in any other medium. Like it's almost weird when I think about it, or even other ones like God of High School, which is more of like an anime, but same idea, kind of like graphic novel comic thing. And the sequences that I think back to, that I can close my eyes and vividly remember back to, aren't ones that had text in them. It's not one that had this crazy like art crazy scene in it. It was something that they conveyed an emotion in such a way in a couple panels that was unreal to me. They would have somebody get hit so hard that they would fly back, and 5 panels would be this person just flying back. Mm-hmm. It gave you understanding. It was like, yeah. Yeah. If I make a sentence that's like, oh, he flew back 1,000 centimeters, like 1,000 feet, and da 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 da, I can describe it to you for as much as you want, but it's still a sentence. me seeing 6 panels of doof 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 doof, I'm like, yo, he just got hit to the other side of the planet. Like I feel that in my chest. Like I feel that. And even more so they can do in a movie, because a movie can't take a 10-second pause to show somebody getting hit all the way back over there. They just have to make it quicker. There's something about the intimacy of graphic novels, of comics, that it merges those two worlds in such a way that it really just creates a plethora of new ways to express emotions, express a scene, express character development, express events. So in that reference, in that like scape, what do you think is your inspiration? What are the scenes that make you think back? Shit, I have a couple stacks of Marvel comics right here. If I crack any of those open, the space designs on those blow your mind open.
Yeah. I mean, for you know, and if you're talking like comics and like, especially if we're talking like superhero comics and stuff like that, you know, it all goes back to Jack Kirby. You know, I mean, like you pick, you know, first of all, like without him and his pencil, excuse me,
the GOAT.
we don't have an MCU. Like,
yeah,
you know, it's a shorter list of characters he didn't create. You know, and like him and Steve Ditko, because Steve Ditko was Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, and you know they're not doing anything with them. So, you know,
Spider-Man is the biggest IP ever made, like ever created by Marvel, which is insane.
Yeah, think about. I mean, but it all goes back to Jack Kirby. Like, I mean, he definitely like just created the language when you're talking about, you know, someone getting hit or someone like, you know, doing something or showing a power or showing a world, and like, you know, he's the guy that created the language that we all sort of, you know, use and continue to use when it comes to creating, you know, characters and panel layouts and like scenery and stuff like that. So like for him, it's, you know, it's hard to like not mention him. You know, for me personally, like, you know, in terms of people that I look at and like, you know, that I sort of go to is like, for me, it's like Sam Keith. It's, you know, the guy, you know, you remember that that MTV series, The Max? I don't know how old you are, you know, but like
I am 98. I just use a lot of lotion.
Oh, all right. Oh, good. You know, I mean, it's working, man. Working.
Yeah. Me and Betty White were an item back in the day.
All right. You know, by the way, Betty White older than sliced bread officially.
Yeah. Yep.
It's official.
And by a while, what is it, like an 8-year difference, something like that? Like, yo.
Yeah. It wasn't a couple of months. It was like years.
Man.
You know, but I mean, you know, legends never die. So, you know,
weird tangent, but I just have to say it's because, you know, we've talked before recording of my background engineering and whatnot. So I always have a fascination about just everything and like how technology works and like society and all those things, right? I'm going to give you a figure. Did you know that the can opener was discovered 65 years after the can? Now, folks, I'll be honest with you. Have you ever, and I'm being dead ass, have you ever been in a broke college student situation and bought a can of something that had no can opener? Listen, I don't know how the fuck you're supposed to open that. I don't know either. I don't. So what the fuck were they doing for 65 years?
I mean, if in any like poor attempt to answer this, like I'm thinking like, you know, maybe like a nail or something. They're just like going around and like, you know, I don't know. Like this is completely out of my wheelhouse. So like
the only thing I can figure is that they put it in a pot and just let it explode.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of.
Yeah. Like they're just like a rock or something and like just like busting. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that.
How crazy is that? That type of explanation, well, that type of like thing, because think about it, when the can happened, it's not like people were walking around like, yo, what the fuck is a can opener? They were just like, yo, cans. Yeah. Yo, we can like preserve food longer now. They weren't even thinking about what they were missing. Think about all the technology that we have now that we don't have the can opener version of yet, that we don't even know we're missing. I'm telling you, that is mostly all of my inspiration. And even though that was a tangent,
it's all good.
No, I actually did do it on purpose, because to me, that is my inspiration. Outside of, you know, the authors, outside of the creatives that we grew up on, that kind of like put all your things together. Because obviously, you know, the things that influence me and like the authors that influence me are great. and many.
Mhm.
But there's also things that just within me, my head, that give me inspiration. Those type of ticks that like thinking about the world in that way. What causes those inspirations for you?
You know, for me, like so, like my day job, I'm a therapist in my day job. Like I'm a
Buddy.
you know I am the person that you come into and you know talk about all those things that you don't really talk about with other people. You know, and that has been a privilege that I very often remind or let my clients know that like you know that I appreciate the trust that they put in me. And like I hear and I've been doing it for about 11 years now, and you know I have heard many a story from people, and it is something that like in there are times where like I hear something and it's like you know it speaks to the perseverance of a person. You know, it speaks to you know you realize like just how strong a person is even though they don't or may not necessarily realize how strong they are. And in doing that I look at myself too, and it's like okay, and it took me a while to figure it out, like these characters in a way represent aspects of my own personality. Like is like if I really look at like who am I, and like what makes me me, and like you know being honest about myself, like Bernie is that piece of me that is the highly to problematically introverted part of myself, where it's like I am almost too comfortable just being by myself. You could leave me in a room all day, I will just sit there and draw. And
Chilling.
as long as I have coffee, and I will sit there and not I could not interact with a person all day and be completely okay. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not. Like
No, I
we are
I fully get that.
we are social animals. Like we're hardwired to seek each other out for a litany of different reasons. But I mean, like, so like I recognize that I can be too introverted sometimes, and my wife helps me out of that, from in ways that work. And Sydney is that part of me that I think is the part of me that like kind of comes from my job, and like recognizes that the world isn't all sunshine and rainbows, and that there are like tough spots out there, and there are bad things out there, and tries in her own way to kind of help people avoid those things if they can, or how to like traverse them and navigate them, and coming out of it as unscathed as possible. you know um Adrian Hodges, like the wizard guy, he's that child piece of me. He's that part of me that still believes in magic, and the symbolism of things, and like meanings, and it has an appreciation and understanding for those things, and doesn't take things too seriously, and is like very easygoing, but also very observant, in ways that people may not you know recognize right away.
Mm.
And then the other girl, the other person, the other character I'm going to get to, and she makes an appearance, in the beginning and in the end of the comic that I'm doing right now with Adrian, is Ann Connors. And she is by day she works at a coffee shop called the Daily Grind. And she also
Damn, that's
plays
a good
good.
name.
Yeah, thank you. She plays guitar and sings in her band called Annie O and the Trick Shots. And
Okay.
she's that piece of me that is just trying to express myself and connect with other people. Like, and that's me plugging into Instagram and meeting people like yourself, and and meeting other people like our mutual friend, Miss Leonard.
Brittany Leonard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out
and
to
like,
Brittany Leonard.
yeah. And but like in plugging into Instagram has been, an amazing thing for me. And like just being able to connect with other, comic artists, other creatives, other writers, storytellers. And like, that's the piece of me with Anne, is like trying to connect with other people. And she has her powers and abilities, and that makes it easy. It makes it more complicated for her sometimes. But like, she's just a person trying to express herself and connect with people. And she's that piece of me, and in all my comics, there are therapeutic elements. There are like therapy-esque, scenes and pieces and components where, they're going through it in one way or another, and, mental health is a component in all the stories, be it very overt or more sort of subjective and stuff like that.
My God. I mean, that ability to just like let your true emotions bleed into your characters, I think is something that really is the hallmark of true character design and true world building. When it's not just that you're creating this like fictional emotional tie for someone that you're like almost like leading somebody into, where you are actually putting a real aspect, a real thing into a fake world. And that to me, that's what makes it real. That's the true blood. So, and it's something that like just I and myself, I just, as you were describing everything, it's so funny because I everything that I had been through in the experiences prior to making my book made it into my first book. I mean, and you're gonna see for yourself, literally the first chapter is like the full chapter is called, like, I remember I wanted to really badly do that thing that like every chapter has a name. You know what I mean? Like the name, like the episodes, like on like a TV show.
Yep.
But it was just one of those things that it worked really well for certain chapters and like just didn't make a lot of sense for others. So it's one of those things where it has to be blanket. So if it's gonna be one, I'd rather have like none than like some. But my idea for that chapter's name was literally called Regret. And as you read through it, it's from the point of view of a character who, it's the main character, but it's from a scene literally 3 seconds before the end of the entire series. And he's basically talking about how his experiences that you haven't yet read up on, but you can assume via like the context. And he's talking about immense regret having taken those paths, and like just like kind of like sitting around thinking about like what could have happened. I think about that all the time. Like that character, like that entire chapter could have just been. I remember in my first drafts, I remember I sent it to my brother and he just sent it back. It was like, oh, is this like a fictional book or is this like an essay? Like, like what's going on? Like it seems like very like on the nose. And that right there, I think it's just like such a fascinating psychological thing, because as you said, even like the self-help in it, right? The things that you do, it's like the lesson that you put in it. It's not just like nice things. It's things that you feel in your chest because you went through those things. I've been through, depression and like had like my suicidal thoughts, and I put that into the book. And the same way that the characters, that as you read the characters like go through it, it's not that just I Googled the shit and figured, oh, what would happen if you were depressed and this happened. I'm literally telling you what I went through in order to get over that myself. Like you're reading real things in a fictional world. And I think that is what the tie is. You could literally make a world about anything, superheroes, whatever you want. If it has that heart in it, I think people are gonna be tied to it. It doesn't matter.
And like, you're saying, you're absolutely right. And like, in terms of storytelling, like, yeah, like we, fantastical worlds, like, outer space, other dimensions, like other places, like, it was advice that Jack Kirby gave to some. I heard an interview from the writer, who was talking about Jack Kirby, what would have been like his 100th birthday, and he was like, exactly what you're saying, like, as long as you make a person react the way to something that anybody else would react, or like if you like just give them real responses, real emotion, real, reactions to things, like you can tell a story anywhere. Like the reader will follow you as long as like it's believable and real. And like if you're putting, I think that we all like try to do that. Like, whether we put ourselves in some way into our work. I think it's hard to like not, to not put yourself into whatever you're doing. Whether, if it's comics, if I'm putting like a little picture on a wall in the background somewhere, or maybe I'm giving a building an address or something like that, or, I'm, using a word for I'm having a character use a word to describe something that I know I do, or something, to that effect. Like, whether it's small or big, like, I think it's hard to get away from not putting ourselves into our work.
That's really funny how life works, because I used to hate English class. I mean, I used to hate all classes, let's be honest, but like English class particular was like a pain in my ass, because like it just never made sense to me. We're over here reading The Great Gatsby, and then like, but what we're talking about in class is the life of Fitzgerald. And I'm over here like, who gives a fuck what he was doing when he wrote the motherfucker? He wrote it. That's all we need to know. And we can just interpret that data in a vacuum. I don't know why we have to include all this like random other spices. Salt and pepper is fine. But as I just kind of like, well, I guess as I started appreciating literature for what it truly is, because I've always liked literature in the sense of just like what is there, right? But when I started appreciating in that sense that like, yeah, that's actually makes a huge difference, I think it then becomes like, it's almost something that I wish that one of my teachers told me, was like, all right, look, if you don't think it matters, look at your favorite authors and compare their lives and tell me it doesn't have some level of correlation on why you like them. Dr. Seuss wrote the most uplifting and crazy shit ever. What was his life filled? Trauma and war.
Mm-hmm.
You look at you look at Hunter S. Thompson. An animal, and look what he was able to write, because he was an animal, dude. Like he lived the life that he wrote about, and to me inspired, like, obviously, like journalism, he obviously like put it into like a new thing, but just writing in an essence, I think it just like changed based off that man, because like it just gave the idea of where like a writer is like a person stuffy wearing a sweater vest, you know what I mean? And then you have this dude over here having taken a pistol and shooting at his neighbors. And when the interviewer asks him, "Oh, why are you doing that?" and he goes like, "Oh, well, I heard him take a shot. And this is America. I'm not gonna just let somebody fire in my backyard." I'm like, you're an animal, dude. You're an animal. You're a psychopath. And that's why he was able to write the shit that he wrote, because he was crazy. And my all these things correlate.
Talking about tangents, my brain kind of goes in two different directions, and like hearing you use those examples, like on one hand, like I hear in a way like, okay, so Dr. Seuss wrote these uplifting, tales, and it's like the foundation of like a lot of people's childhoods and stuff like that, but his life was literally shit, and then you have Hunter S. Thompson, or and like the character in his own right that he was, like on one way I hear, like be the, like I hear, what is it, like, was it Gandhi or someone who was like, be the change in the world that you want to see. Like make the thing that you want, like create the thing that you need. Chances are somebody else needs it too. It's like, we're not alone in this. Like we're it's always that thing of like the kid in the class who, when the teacher's like, does anybody have any questions? Nobody raises their hand because they're all nervous to like ask the question. But then there's that one person who does, and then you see like the four other kids go, "Oh, I'm so glad somebody else asked that." Because I was thinking the same thing. It's just that you had the drive and the determination and the passion to write the story, to like put those things in there, and it's, in terms of therapy, like, and kind of bringing it to like some therapeutic sides of it, like in group therapy, there's this, it's this idea called universality. Like, okay, so we have a group, and we're all here for kind of the same reasons. Our experiences aren't identical to each other, but we all kind of have this thing in common that is kind of bugging us to one degree or another. And, being able to talk about it and share experiences with other people who have gone through or are going through, a similar thing can be healing in a way, and hearing how they overcame it, or just hearing that like somebody else feels the same way that I feel, and like, oh, I'm not alone, because like when you really break down the definition of therapeutic, it's just anything related to the healing from a disease or an illness. Like it doesn't say what, just anything related to the healing. And like sometimes hearing somebody else say, yeah, that really sucks for me too, and I feel the same way, that sense of like, okay, it's not just me. Like I'm not like the odd duck.
Wow. It is just, it's intensive,
Mm-hmm.
But kind of going on to like how like this inspiration kind of like all goes into like the writing, because like, I mean, my God, we can turn this into a whole forum about therapy.
Probably.
So one thing that kind of like makes me go like onto are like the challenges in writing certain characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy when you have a relatable experience, or when you have like a character in your mind, but then what do you do when you have a character that you just want in the story? You know that for a fact, and you know that they're an impeachable part of the story, but you don't share the experiences of that character. What do you do? Like in that time, in that situation?
What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
I that's, I don't know, that's the short answer is I don't know. The long answer is like, because like there are a couple of characters that come to mind, as I hear you ask that. Like I do have like, and they're in the world with these other characters, and like they're not prominent, mainstays, but like they're there and they serve a purpose. And I just, I kind of keep them to, I guess cameos in a way, to use a term. Is like, okay, they're there and they're there, they'll pop up once in a while. I and this is a tough one. You're making me kind of scratch my head. I mean, the short answer is like I just don't do anything with them yet. Like, and because I don't know, I know I want them there, but I don't know what their purpose is. Like they have a purpose, but I just don't know what it is yet. Like I have this one character who, he was really born out of like this drawing I did of Sydney back in the day. And he's this little, personified cat, little kind of character. And he has a personality. I gave him a personality kind of similar to the pug from Men in Black. This sort of like, rough, sort of like, but kind of too big for his britches kind of thing. And he's there, and I want to do something with him, and like he has a a relationship, as like a informant almost with Sydney, but like I don't know what I want to do with him yet. So it's like he's there, I know he's there, but I just don't know what I want to do with him yet. And so I in a way to try to answer that question is, I just recognize that they're there. I just let it be known that they're there. And, when their purpose gets revealed, is when I'll do something with them.
Wow.
Because I did a 24-hour comic challenge back in 2018, 2019. And I tried to do a story with that character, and it just didn't feel right. Like, and I'm like, okay, this will never see the light of day in the version that it's in. And so it's like, if I don't believe it, if I don't feel good or believe what I'm trying to put down on the page, like it's likely that other people won't either. And I don't want to put that out there.
Man, I don't know why, but that just made me like think about like one. There is this one story that I created, and I created with this like idea that I would just always revisit it for like seasonal short stories. So the
Hmm.
first one I wrote was a Thanksgiving story, and like the idea that I would always like drop a Christmas one, a New Year's one, Easter, XYZ, right?
Hmm.
And the reason I like it thematically and philosophically is because that little short story exists in a much larger world that's a lot significantly more serious than this story. But I just like the idea because your introduction to this massively more dramatic world I have yet to even drop yet, which actually will be my first graphic novel set.
All
Uh,
right.
it's a pirate story that I told you about. Banshee Cannot Die.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So within that world, there's because I was just thinking there's nothing that fascinates me more about the whole Marvel thing than the idea that like you're in a world that's so large that while you're reading a Spider-Man story, he bumps into somebody, and that somebody just happens to be Iron Man's assistant on her way to do XYZ. Like that's the to me that was the most that is the most like part of like about Marvel in an essence. It's just that continuity that it just goes on forever, and it truly feels like you can like dive into a fantastical world like that because it is endlessly diveable. Like everything is connected the same way that our world is. It gives you, it's almost that reminiscent thing. How many times in your life have you met somebody from 9 countries over? You go to a bar and you're like, oh, you know him? What the hell? It just happens. We're like the world. That's how the world is. So when you see that in artistic form, it's like it's almost like the uncanny valley thing, where your mind just immediately goes like, "Yeah, no, that happens in the real world as well," and you can just dive into it, even if it's not a thing that you're like that you're currently thinking about. It just lets you dive into it,
Hmm.
and I love that. By the same point, I always felt like to what I said, I guess like the characters that I made for within that world, I've never been able to pick up on it. Why I've never had that like true motivation in order to like write them. But I think that's why, because I created them kind of like, all right, well, I want this character to do this and I want this character to do that, and I'll make people around them and I can base them off XYZ. But like there wasn't that thing in me, there wasn't that emotional
Yeah.
thing of like, all right, let me give them like, the tip of my pinky type of
Right.
thing. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah. You didn't feel it yet. You didn't
yeah,
believe.
yeah, exactly. And I like how you said it yet, because
Yeah.
anything is fixable, especially when you're creating like your own world and everything. So when it comes to that level of creation, how do you treat the art side of everything?
Um, the art side of it, I like in terms of like stylistically or like technically.
Technically, so right, so like walk me down. It's 2016. You have these
All right.
ideas for a comic book. How did you go from telling your wife, "Hey, babe, I think I might want to start doing this," to you actually doing that?
It started out with just like drawing sketches. So like all like the outside of Cannoli Girl, like the four characters, like this whole thing. I mean, aside from my own just personal love of comics and growing up on that healthy diet I told you about, um, I started playing a game, a lot of like an online game years ago, DC Universe Online.
Hey, that's not a bad game.
Yay! It is. And I played it for a long time. I had a membership to it and socked a lot of hours into it, met some really cool people. But the premise of the game is like you create your own character,
Mm-hmm.
you give them powers, you give them abilities, you give them an aesthetic, and then you send them off into this world with Batman and Superman and Green Lantern and Wonder Woman and all this stuff. And I started just like making these characters, and then there was a website, then there's like the forums, and people are just chatting about different things, and some people started writing fan fiction about their characters, and it was cool and interesting and fun. And I was bored at work one day and decided to be like, oh, okay, let me try this. And it we all just kind of shopped stories back and forth together, and then that got me back into like reading comics and going back to the comic store and like picking up stuff and like, okay, what's going on with this character, who's this character, and like just getting back into it. And then all the while I just kept writing about, at that time it was just writing about Bernie, primarily. And, and then as I started kind of getting ideas for other characters and writing about them and, more or less just like, I guess like Freudian kind of free association, just like writing it out loud as I went. And, and then just getting back into reading comics. And then of all things, I was reading this Batman story. I picked up a couple of this like little mini series from Batman, and I was reading it and felt frustrated because it was just wordy. It just felt too wordy for Batman. Like Batman, okay, he broods, he's the guy in the shadows, he's the detective and all this stuff, but like the dialogue, like the way that it read, it just felt too dense to be Batman. And I was like, man, like who wrote this? Like, like I could write a better, and then like the light bulb went off. And then I was like, wait a minute, like people self-publish all the time. People do their own thing all the time. And like, I have this thing and I'm trying to like figure out what it is. And that just drove me into like, okay, like I'm gonna work on this. I'm gonna do this. And once I made the decision to like just do it myself, that's when things really kicked into high gear. And like, getting back to the original question, I pencil my pages on 11 by 17 with the margin blue line Bristol board, and I do all my pencils, some more detailed than others, and then I'll scan those into my computer and I ink and color and letter everything in Clip Studio Paint. And I take and I've got time lapses some progress pics from different posts on my Instagram of like taking it from the rough pencils to the finished page. And that's the process. Some pages I can get done in with the time that I have at night. Like sometimes if it's not a lot to a page, I can do a page, ink and color a page in a night. Sometimes it's a series of a couple hours over the course of a couple of nights, taking it from pencil to finished page. But that's the process.
Wow, it is insane. Like the only reason I like think about it, I'm just like thinking about putting myself in the shoes of that. I'm like, oh my god, writing is a MF as it is. I can only imagine going attaching all the art side on top of it too. My Jesus. But man, there is something just so fulfilling about that though. It's exactly what you said. It's just one of those things, like, everything starts I think creation starts from a love of what's been created,
Mm-hmm.
Like I've loved TV, and I think I just missed the comic book thing for just a little bit. I'm 27, so like I think I missed the comic book phrase by just a couple of years, because like I remember like anytime people say like, oh, I grew up reading comic books, I'm like, where? There was no comic book stores when I grew up. Like how were you doing that? That's impossible. So, and it wasn't like Amazon or Marvel.com, like like how there was like now. Like I don't know, honestly, anyone that says that they were like reading comic books when they were young at my age frame, I call bullocks. How were you doing that? Honestly, honestly, because I would have, if that I would have been all around that if that was happening around me. But to me, it was TV and video games, and I've always played games. If you want to talk about therapy and just like things, I've always just delved myself into fantastical like worlds like that. I played DCU Online. I played World of Warcraft for years. I played like my thing was always games like that, and like whereas like games that you would have that you could just pop in and pop out real quick, never landed on me. I've never been a Call of Duty fan. I never played like those RPGs that much. Every so often I'd play a game with like a cool story like BioShock or God of War. I'll play that for a little bit just because like I'm a fan of those type of like stories, but they never stuck with me like the same way those like things are. And at the end of the day, what I can like think back on That's because I need that, the ability to just fully dive into something. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like an obsessive type of thing, because I do, especially when it comes to like an MMO, right? You stop playing, and then on the way to work, you're thinking it's like all right, now if I farm the materials for like half hour, when I get back, I could have that thing within a couple days. Like, you're doing math
If I get a
at
lucky
work.
here and there, I could,
Yeah, you're doing
But I mean,
math
like,
at work
yeah,
about a fantasy game.
yep. But I think because and I knew what it was for me, like why, part of the reason why I liked playing DC Universe so much, and I think it's why a lot of people like playing, those type of games, like those MMOs where you can kind of get in and
Make a new
do these
life,
things,
basically.
is like it meets a need. Like it meets a need that you have to feel something, to experience something that maybe isn't as prevalent, in your terra firma world. So like you can pop into, and for some people it might be like, I have a purpose here, like these people need me, because of whatever role you're playing, or whatever. But like being in that world with those people meets a need that you have, in my opinion, in personal opinion. I know that that's what it was for me, is like I didn't feel like I had people around that I could talk about comics with, or talk about pop culture stuff with, and that like really, and that like they liked it, and like being in a world with a bunch of other nerds was really attractive, and it felt good to connect with people. But also I can be this character and do these things where like I can't do them in this other part of my life, you know so maybe that's what it is. And like and yeah, like it's like you're running those things in the back of your mind like all the time, like like, and for me it's like I have I can turn the volume down on it really well. But like I was talking to a friend of mine a couple weeks ago, because he was asking about what I'm working on and stuff, and he's like, is it always going, like is it always running in your head? And I was like, yeah, like there's always that world, and there's always that that those open tabs going on in the background. And I can turn the volume down really low on it, so it doesn't interfere with my work, my other personal family life and relationships and stuff. But like it's always running in the back. And like like I might listen to I might hear a song, or like I might something on TV, the way that like a scene is set, or like the way that like a word that a character uses, or like a line from a song, or like a rhythm from a song, and it just resonates with you, or resonates with me in a way where like I have to write it down. And like, here's my writing process. Okay. It's really, really, really like, sophisticated stuff. All right. It's a piece of paper, torn piece of paper, taped to my drawing board with the character name. And then like, if it's like a line from a song, it's like, here's that line from the song. And like, this is the theme for that character. This is the theme that I'm trying to get across for this character. This is the thing that I want to convey to this, with this character in the story. Like that's it. Like, and then I sit down and like, I think about, like, I approach like the story building just in terms of like page one to like, typically my books are like 30 pages. Like, okay, like I kind of approach it like frame by frame animation. Like you have like your keyframes, like those scenes that you want to show, like the big, like big pose shots or whatever. It's like, okay, I want to show this in this scene, and then I want to show this over here. How do I get from here to here? How do I fill in those frames and have it believable, relatable, understandable, in X number of pages.
My God. Man, it's just the way that all these comes together is just insane to
Hmm.
me, because all
Hmm.
that deep passion is what wakes you up one day and go, and because when you're watching that favorite thing, because inspiration works both ways, right? Where you watch
Hmm.
something, you're like, wow, that is amazing, and then it inspires you to create your own thing. But then, right, you watch that TV show, you play that one game, and they just messed up, like, oh man, it would have been so much better if they just did this. And that right there is what gets you to pick up the pen, or pick up the pencil, or pick up the keyboard, whatever it is that you do.
Hmm.
That is the thing. And that right there, I think, is what separates like the creatives between the people that just, well, I can't say just, but between like that and the people that like hop on like forums and just talk about the thing all day. The passions are the same, but I think it's just like that thought that eventually goes like, ah, you know what, I can do this. Like, what's really the difference between me and XYZ over here? And then you go after it, and then you do it. And then
Hmm.
in your case, just like as you said, because I'm really just I really just resonate on that thing, because it just goes by like one of my favorite things I ever heard on this podcast was like it was actually on episode 3. I will never forget, Steve Argans, and he was talking about self publishing as a buffet, and he was saying that when you go to a buffet, you don't just want prime rib, steak tips, and lobster tails. You also want chicken nuggets and fries and whatever the fuck. Like, you don't know what people are going to a buffet for. All you can do is offer. And I've always liked that analogy, and I think what you said adds on to that and adds like a crazy, like, just like extra layer, and taking that point and saying that like whatever it is that you are putting emotionally into that book, maybe it might not be for the millions, but there's at least a couple in there that can resonate with you and also need that same way that you needed it. It's just how it works. Like, it's how the internet works. How many times do you see like a meme that says a pretty, honestly, I mean, like, generalized philosophy, but it just like resonates with people in a certain way, and that thing goes viral. And you're sitting there like, wait a
Hmm.
minute, now I wrote the same thing in less words in chapter 4 of my book. Why the hell am I not going viral, right? But you think that, but it's just like different mediums, right? That
Hmm. Yeah.
the essence, the emotion in itself is the same, and that resonation is going to be the same whether it's picked up by 10,000 or if it's picked up by 10. You're still connecting to somebody, and I think
Hmm.
that right there in itself is what is beautiful. Because the whole thing that you said about introversion, I mean, like, I'm there with you. I was ungroundable as a child. If you told me that I can't play outside anymore, I'd be like, I bet. I'd come inside and play video games. You took away my video games, I'd be like, I bet. Alone in my room drawing, like, what are you gonna do? Take pencil and paper away from me? You can't get me. Like, I was always cool with things. Like, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, and in that thing, that weirdness, all those like weird little quirks and things that make a person, I was able to take all those things and put it into like my art, right? And I find that so interesting, especially with the whole thing about being an introvert, because introverts are like, the whole thing about it is like almost like a little lack of in the social like aspects of being able to like just do everything, right? But if you look at it, our art is doing the same thing.
Hmm.
Our art is connecting us to other people. Our art like helps us, lets us express our emotions in a way that maybe we ourselves aren't comfortable to just outright say to the normal Joe.
And it's kind of a weird thing because like I hear you say that, and like I I'm instantly brought back to a conversation I had with an artist when I was at a convention just as a patron. One of my, he's a phenomenal artist and storyteller, and I have like just a mountain of respect for this man, Chris Campana. You know, I was just like, hey, we were talking about, I was just asking him advice and like, hey, how do I approach this? What is it? And one of the things that he was talking about, he was like, he's like, we are the most insecure narcissists ever. He was like, in that, he's like, because like we want our work to get attention, and like, and again, just those things that you hear, that just you hear it at the right time, you hear it from the right person, you know, and it could be anything, just like their tone, their body posture when they say it, anything, whatever, But he was like, we want our work to get attention, but we don't necessarily want the attention. And it's this this dance that like I think all creatives do, where it's like you want your book to get attention, you want your stories to get attention, you want your characters to get attention, but like it's like this struggle of like accepting that for yourself, and like, you know, you can't separate yourself from it. You can't separate, like, everybody knows you did your book, everybody knows you wrote your book, everybody knows I drew these comics, but it's like, no, don't look at me, look at
Look
this.
at the art. Yeah.
Yeah, read this. Don't no go read this, go look at this. Like, don't, no, it's this. And I know I've struggled with it for a long time. It took me a long time to get comfortable with letting people just look at my sketchbooks, and like and just even talking about the characters, and like and like feeling protective of it. And like
getting defensive when somebody like questions something. It's like, oh, what do you mean?
Not even question it, but like I just like I don't know, because like I never really talked about it, so nobody could question it. I never let anybody look at it, so like there was nothing to question. But I would just quietly, in my own little time and places, do my own little thing. And this one time, I was at a cafe in Westerly, you know, drawing. I had some time to like, you know, sit down and draw something. And I had put my stuff on the counter by the window, my portfolio, my sketchbook, my markers and stuff. I went and got a coffee, and I got the coffee, and then I go over to the fixins table, and I'm putting my stuff in it, and I see these two grown adults. We're not talking children. These are grown adults looking through my stuff, like, just like, again, I'm over here, they're over here, and they're just going to the point where like the woman even picked up one of my markers, took the cap off, and is like, and I'm having this out of body experience, like, no, like I felt like I like, and it was on a couple different levels is why it bothered me. Like, one, like, no, I don't want anybody to see that, but at the same time, like this is wrong on like you're crossing a lot of boundaries right now. And like it was one of those moments that like it just bothered me for like a lot of different reasons. But like, just, I think the theme is like just being protective of your work, and, you know, not being able to, trying to separate yourself in some ways.
Man, that made me think of two things immediately. That made me think of like everything you're saying as far as like art goes, but it also made me think like that's just how trained in society that we are, that the moment you see something happening a little bit out of thing, that like it's like almost everything in your body. It's almost like those like movie scenes that like, you know, the next scene is like you charging over there and beating the shit out of them, and you realize it's like just your fantasy as you like stare at them like blankly. And I think it's just that, right? It's that like you're literally in shock over seeing something so crazy. Like I remember the first time I saw somebody blatantly steal something, blew my mind open. They just walked into a store, said, "Oh, this looks nice," and just walked right out. And I'm telling you, even the store clerk was there, like, "What do I call the police? Like, what happens now? Do I give up my child? What happens now?" Yeah. Like, it's such a just funny, God, and just thinking about how that weirdly enough still ties into the whole creative process and like the whole thing of like my art is mine. Because even when you're creating the art, it's like those little societal things that you can go ahead and then play with if you're making a world and just like things like that. God, these type of world buildings are endless to me. And I just love everything that you have going together with like Dork Art Comics, and more so this time frame, this like chat so far has just cracked open a window into just the emotional side between everything, all the inspiration, the passion. And I think that just adds so much more for me and hopefully for the listeners as well. So
hopefully
I want to go ahead and give you some time to just like, you know, do a little promo at the end. You know, there's already 4 books out now, 4 issues out now. He has went through them. We have Burn Notice, right?
Burn Unit.
I don't know why. I just still have like that beautiful thing, Burn. I don't know why. I get fascinated with certain things that like I almost get like jealous of. And it's like Burn. Damn, that's a good name. That's like on the money. Sydney James.
Yep.
Then we have Cannoli Girl.
Yep.
And just how everything is going together. Like, where can people first find these issues? Where can someone get a copy of it?
It's all through me. I'm kind of a control freak in that regard when it comes to my work and my art. Like if people, want a copy of any of it, I have regular covers, I have sketch covers that I can do, custom, covers for people. And it's all just through my Instagram. Just, I'm on Instagram, Dork Art Studios. Just, find me, message me, and I'll find a way to get it to you. I have prints available that are, I pretty much anything on my page that you want a print of it, I can get you a print of it. Open for commissions, if somebody wants something, kind of a one-off thing. But it's all just through me on my Instagram. That's where I am, posting regularly, trying to just, get it all out there.
And I truly have to say I am a huge fan of this man's work and work ethic, honestly, because graphic novels, I'm telling you, I mean, just anyone that listens on and is doing the whole writing game by themselves, writing is, believe me, very difficult. But just attach that to also drawing the mediums for every single scene. I mean, I can only imagine. Just what maybe I'm just like thinking about it with like my art style, because like when I draw something once, I'm like, man, I hit it. Drawing it twice, get out of here. It's not happening. They're gonna have different size arms, the eyes gonna look different, it's just how it is.
And your stuff's pretty good, man. Like you're pretty good with a pen there.
Oh well, thank you. I don't know. Like it is. It's like I guess it's just like the thing of like an artist. It's just like you look at your own work and you don't see what you did well. You always look at like where you can improve, right? So that's all I ever see. It's like, oh man, I still didn't learn how cross hatching, like little things like that. Just like it's like, oh man, when will I learn how to color? Because if you notice, a lot of my stuff is black and white, so I still don't feel like I even have like basic color schemes down. But I think that's the reason I love this thing, and the reason I love doing this podcast, and the reason I love talking to people like you, is because it doesn't matter how hard something is. There's a true passion for it, and literally, has been proven. I mean, I don't know if people like know, but there's not like crazy amounts of money in this. Just to let you know,
you have to love it.
I'm telling you, this is not a thing of like the true passion has to be here. Like not even like 40%. There's no person that I've talked to that has 1 foot or even a foot and a half into this. They have 3 feet posted and their hands and everything. They are ready to go. They are swimming. No surfboard, open waters, and it's dark and it's really hard to see where you're going. But there is just something there, and you just know that you're going to hit land eventually. And truly, with what you have spoken to me about, with everything you showed me, with everything that I've already seen on Instagram, and again, everything, all his links will be in the bio, will be in the description, it'll be in the panels underneath, you know how everything goes. But make sure to follow him on Instagram, because I'm telling you, all of these things, all of his like work is very much worth the praise. And I really think that you're going to hit land soon, because I'm telling you, like that level of passion. I always have said that that's the main beacon to really good art. When a person truly puts their soul into a piece of work, and it's no longer just a piece of work, it's something that people can like really vibe with. Look at Fight Club and Chuck Palahniuk. I mean, like that anarchist feeling that he had, that he put into his books, it literally became a channel for every anarchist in like life. So like I think that you're on the roll to something like that you're going to be able to,
I appreciate that
you're going to be able to put something out that people can truly, and not just 1 or 2, but a lot of people can put their soul into. And it's not just going to be something that they like and they like watching. It's going to be something that they harp over, like Breaking Bad. I harp over Breaking Bad. Oh my god. So
that is high praise. Thank you.
Well, and I mean every single word of it. So this, unfortunately, is the end of the podcast, because we can be talking for years. I mean, oh my god, I actually had that feeling. I'm not lying to you. 20 minutes in, where I was like, fuck. Man, this can go on for a long time.
We'll do another one sometime, right?
Oh no. without a single doubt, I will have you back on, and very soon, because goddamn, well, I'm gonna restart doing the group cast I did before, because those were so fun to record. It's just like timing for everything has been insane for me, but I am getting way better. I'm getting way better with my schedule, and those are coming soon for all the listeners. So again, this is the end of the podcast, AR's Tales, aka the ART podcast. I have been A.R. Mirabal, and this has been the legendary Mike Alger. Dork Art Comics. I'm telling you, folks, it's gonna be like one of those scenes that, like, you know, when you like that little clip of Bradley Cooper in the background, at, like, asking somebody a question while he was doing improv. This is gonna be one of those things. He's gonna be in Jimmy Kimmel talking about. It's like, oh yeah, I remember my first interview with this guy. He had a huge head. Weird conversations. Couldn't keep anything on track. Tangents everywhere. You know how it goes. First interview. So you're gonna be laughing about it. I'm gonna be over here just with a box of tissues, watching Jimmy Kimmel, like, oh man, I used to know that guy. And I truly do believe that. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on, Mike. And again, folks, pick up the work. You already said everything. I mean, commissions on top of that. Imagine having a favorite comic book that also has a personalized cover. That's new age to me. That's some crazy shit. I mean, that's basically NFT for books. I mean, that's uncharted territories. I always get really excited when I hear ideas like that, and that is definitely something like, whoa, exciting. So I think a lot more ears and I need to be listening to that. To people, not only yourself, tell other people about it. Where can you get a custom cover from? I'm losing my mind here. Imagine Harry Potter with your own cover. That's bananas. So again, hop on it while it's still fresh, people. I'm telling you this, like getting Bitcoin when it was like under $5 per unit. This is the one, folks. Invest. Ding, 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 the button with like me dabbing it. Go ahead and do it, folks. Well worth
Checks
it.
in the mail, man. Checks in the mail.
And again, we will see you next week. This has been A.R.'s Tales. Peace out.